Welcome back, squad. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Full Ride, the College Recruiting and Athletic Scholarship podcast powered by URECRUITU. This is your host, Coach Kito Delgado, and today you are in for a treat. I have joining me Joi Walker, and Joi is not only a former Division I college athlete. She played basketball, but she's also a former college coach. So she's able to share some great insight, not only from a student athlete's point of view, but from a college coach's point of view when it comes to recruiting. And today, Joi is the founder of Sets for Life, and her mission is to provide athletes with the tools they need to successfully transition into life after sports. I know. In case you don't know, not everyone goes on to become a pro athlete. I did not go pro. Joi did not go pro. And so really Joi is doing some phenomenal work and really helping today's college athletes navigate that process. So I really think you're going to enjoy this episode. We touch on the college recruiting, but we also, like I said, get into how you can navigate that process of going from a college athlete to an employee, an entrepreneur, a teacher, a doctor, whatever your career path may be. Now, as you know, this is a free podcast. We don't charge you anything for this, for this information. So we only ask one thing. Please be a good teammate and share it. Share this episode with your friends, your families, your teammates, your coaches, because we really want to spread the word. And if you really like the episode, leave us a review and rank the show on your favorite podcast app. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, and Stitcher. But I've spoken long enough. So without further ado, here is my interview with Coach Joi Walker. Joi, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, and just really glad you taking some time to chat with us. And so want to take a few moments to introduce yourself to our listeners, let them know who you are, where you're from, and then also just what you're doing today, and then we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Joi Walker, originally from St. Louis, Missouri. Fell in love with basketball at a very, very early age. Was fortunate enough to fulfill my dream of playing D1 ball. Played at South Carolina State University. Left there and worked in accounting for a while and just really, really missed the game. So got back into coaching, and that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
That's awesome. So before we get into what you're doing today, I do want to rewind a little bit because I mentioned this in my introduction before you hopped on to our listeners, that you're really going to provide some guidance on what our athletes can do while in college, some mistakes that they can make, avoid making, but also just really how to help them transition, from that college athlete to a professional, in something other than athletics. But before we get to that, I want to kind of rewind in time and talk about briefly your recruiting journey. So I'm just curious. So how did you find your way to a D1 scholarship, opportunity?
Well, I took a somewhat non-traditional route. In high school, I had a couple of quote unquote small D1 offers that I wasn't interested in, and didn't really have the family in my ear to sort of guide me in the right direction. So I decided to forego some of those Division I offers and go to junior college, which
Mm.
actually turned out to be a really, really good decision. I love junior college because it gives athletes the time to develop, whether it needs to be on the court, on the field or in the classroom. So went to a junior college, had a great experience down south, and decided to go to South Carolina State University. But again, by not having, the family or, someone in my ear, I made one of the mistakes that a lot of students make, and that is, just going to a college because, oh, I had this great visit, or, I really vibed with the players. And I went to a school where they didn't even have what I wanted to major in.
Mm.
And so, having to, change my major and just do something that I didn't think I really wanted to do is just one of the mistakes that I made that I see so many student athletes making.
That's a two things we can definitely touch on. One, because I do believe junior college gets a bad rap. A lot of times people think, oh, well, if you go to junior college, it's only because you're not eligible. It's only because you got no offers. So clearly you had offers, you were
Yeah.
eligible.
Mhm.
You went because you just wanted to improve your skills to maybe get, the types of offers that you want. So, families I talk to often, um, you know, always evaluate your options at the end of the day. And I don't say change the goal, I say change the plan. So partly, you may just need to, to consider those prep schools, those junior colleges, like Joy did. But now flip fast forward. So I think you made a good decision because I don't want to settle this for any school. I have certain schools I want to go to, which
Right,
is
right.
fine. But that was a big mistake that you said you made where um you didn't evaluate everything, including if they even had your major. So I'm definitely glad that you you shared that with us. You
Yeah.
don't want to do that, student athletes. You really, so besides academics, just what advice would you give to student athletes who are, getting recruited and maybe they're taking some of these official visits before we get into, transitioning to once they get to school? The last question is really like, as they go on their official visits or even unofficial visits, what are some things that they should really be looking out for and questions they should be asking?
Oh, they have to do some tough things, especially if you're 17, 18 years old. You have to find a way to begin with the end in mind. You have to get past just going to school because, oh, I love the colors, or it's close to home, or my friends are going there. And you have to sort of think about, okay, where do I want to be when football or basketball is over? And how can this school, how can this program, how can these coaches and the resources that are on campus really, really help me to become an engineer or a teacher or an entrepreneur or whatever the case may be? And you have to ask some of those tough questions that other recruits might not ask. And you might want to ask, what are some of your former players doing? I don't just want to speak with, your current players. I want to see where your former players are, what they majored in, how they're doing. Did they actually land something in their field? And really, really, like I said, just trying to picture what it is that you want to do and not focus so much on the sport. Yes, you want it to be a fit, with the coaching staff and with the style of play and those things, but you really want to position yourself and set yourself up for life after sports.
I love that. And, just speaking about life after sports. So you graduated, you didn't go pro, like most of us. I say us because I played Division I football. I didn't go pro. And
Yeah.
again, families know I always stress this. I will never ever be that person to tell a student athlete that they can't go pro. But I will just say this, that all of us don't go pro. Somebody
Right.
can't go pro. So just so you were one of them, I was one of them where we did not go pro. So you
Yeah.
went into one field, accounting, and then you did transition. You said you got back. Now I know reading your bio, you went back into the college ranks as a coach, correct?
I did.
So can you just talk briefly on, and then we're going to get into what you're doing today because I think it's great, the services that you provide, and really just the coaching. But while you were a college coach, what are some um, you know things that student athletes need to know about a Division I coach or a college coach, period? Maybe some of the pressures that you all face, the amount of time that you're under, like, or like the fact that you can't recruit, as much as people may think because you are stretched so thin. Are there some misconceptions or just some things you'd like to share with our families, kind of like behind the curtain look about, the mindset of a college coach?
The It's interesting to be on the other side because as a coach, I coach NAIA and JUCO, and everybody wants to get that D1 coaching job. But when you get there, it can be it's an interesting process for sure. And I know a lot of kids or coaches will reach out to coaches via email, and we're getting so many emails today. I mean, I couldn't even count the emails that we get. But I would really, really focus on, it's not all about July. It's really about relationships, and whether it is, having your high school coach to reach out or having an AAU coach to reach out, we really get uh, enamored with just a ton of, emails and phone calls. And some coaches might be recruiting a certain area. And that's something that people don't, always think about. Just because you're D1 doesn't mean you have a huge budget. So I might not be able to go from Tennessee to New York to recruit a kid. I might have to recruit locally. So those are just some of the things that people might not think about, but that are really, really a part of the process.
Yeah, that definitely, I do. I say this like, often as well, whether it be in seminars or in speeches. Definitely, college recruiting is regionally based, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times it's relationships.
Hmm.
So either going to, let's say you have a certain area, from a budget standpoint, you're only gonna, recruit the Northeast or down south,
Right.
or a lot of times you guys will rely on your relationships with certain coaches who will say, "Hey,
Hmm.
hey, coach, I got one for you. You guys definitely
Hmm.
want to check this person out." So, families, you gotta, I know you want to do the emails, but you just also gotta understand, you may want to do your homework and just look at the rosters. Like it's really
Right.
easy.
Right.
You
Where
can
are
look
these
at the,
kids from?
you can go to the roster
Yeah.
and say that. And here's just a quick little tip too, because I'll put on my sales cap for my family's free little nugget for y'all. So in sales, you got to anticipate the objection, right? So you just heard Joy say you get a ton of emails all the time, or you only recruit certain areas. So you may want to write this down when you reach out to a coach. You say, "Hey, coach, I was looking at your roster, and I know you don't typically recruit kids from my area. However," and see how you just took that objective right away.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe you lead off by saying that. There's something to think about. But yeah, you want to try to take that objection away. Or, coach, I know you get a ton of these emails, but when you have some time in between preparing for your upcoming game, name the name of the school that they're going against. Here's a link to my huddle on my YouTube page with about 30 seconds of highlights. Hope you can check it out. So there are some ways you can get around that. I'm not saying don't reach out to them, but just don't send a canned email. Do your
Yeah.
homework, do your research, and then also just leave them a quick voicemail. I think that's just as effective too. But now let's focus on, because I love what you're doing. I do. I thank you for taking some time to talk about, just the recruiting element of it. And but yeah, we definitely want to, there's no sense in getting to school and, getting that athletic scholarship and being in a great environment where you have all these resources around you and you just don't take advantage of them. So can you talk about what you're doing today, but then as importantly, what prompted you to do the work you're involved with?
Yeah, so it's sort of an interesting story. As we talked about earlier, I went to school for accounting. And while I was in school, I didn't really position myself. I spent way more time on the court than I did in the library. And I didn't have the greatest GPA when I graduated. And a lot of people don't think about, some people focus on being eligible, which of course you need to be eligible to play. But once you're applying for certain internships and certain graduate programs, you need to have a 3.5, a 3.2, whatever the case may be. And I didn't have that. So coming out, I did not intern in the summer. Like I said, I didn't really position myself for a career in corporate America. So I had a ton of odd jobs in between, just trying to get to this accounting job that I wanted to get to. And when I finally got it, I was unhappy. I wasn't crazy about the cubicle. And I really, really missed competing. So after a couple of accounting jobs, I got back into coaching. I took this crazy risk. I literally cut my salary in half, moved into a dorm, but it was the greatest decision I ever made. So that's how I got back into coaching. But once I started coaching, I started to see these red flags. Like I said, I've coached NAIA, JUCO, and Division One, and I saw that my players were doing the exact same thing that I was doing as a player.
Mhm.
I saw that there was this broken system in place because as coaches, I mean, I watch film until my eyeballs are dry. I mean, I know the other team inside out, and we spend hours putting practice plans together and scouting reports, and we prepare to win. And I love winning. Don't get me wrong. I want to get a ring. I want to hang up a banner. I want my name to be in the history books. I love winning. But I think that sometimes as coaches, we can focus so much on winning and recruiting that we forget that these student athletes, a lot of them are going to face this identity crisis once they graduate. Because I started playing basketball before I could even remember. And once it was over for me, I had no idea what I was good at outside of basketball. All I knew how to do was
Mm,
to put that ball in the basket. I didn't understand the amazing skills that I developed through years of playing this sport, whether it be communicating with people from different backgrounds, thriving under pressure, how to work hard, perseverance, all of those things. I didn't understand how to transfer those skills. And like I said, as a coach, I saw my players doing the same thing. And I spent all this time making them better basketball players, but I wasn't really taking the time to ask them, hey, you're majoring in biology. What are you planning on doing with that degree? Or you're majoring in business, but you haven't had any internships. What are your expectations for when this is over? So like I said, seeing that year after year after year just really started to bother me and to get under my skin. So it
mm.
it helped me to launch a podcast that I have. It's called Sets for Life. And Sets for Life is dedicated to training, equipping, and empowering student athletes for life after sports, where we do a host of different things from, like I said, identifying those transferable skills, helping you to see yourself as more than just an athlete, because we all know the numbers. Less than 2% of us are going to go pro, but you're going to need to find a way to feed yourself. And I think a lot of athletes really get caught up in this. I'm going to go D1 and I'm going to play on ESPN and I'm going to, fly, charter, and I'm going to eat good and stay in nice hotels. And we have this luxurious life for 4 years. People roll out the red carpet for us, and we don't ever pause to think about how we can maintain that sort of lifestyle. And a lot of us, because we don't prepare, we struggle when it's over to get that initial job or to figure out who we are without our sport. And the combination of all of that is what helped me to start Sets for Life.
No, I love the mission, and you just you drop some fire. And I'll be honest, just kind of not exposing, but just in the interest of just talking to our student athletes, letting them know like I was that athlete, like I was the exact same way. Played played football. I went to Northeastern. We had all these. It's a great school. They have internships, and instead of really taking serious internships,
Hmm.
I would work in the school's registrar's office,
Yeah.
or, tagging computers, what I mean? Nothing legit. So here I am playing D1 football, going to a very good school,
Hmm.
Northeastern. They
Hmm.
have built in internships, and I completely, wasted those opportunities. And then when I got out of school, I took some, couple random jobs. So, you're making a really a good point about the mistakes that we make. So now, how about you share it? First of all, I love your podcast. I check it out. You guys definitely want to make sure you
Thank you.
subscribe to Sets for Life podcast. It's on Apple and Stitcher, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, so check out Sets for Life podcast, Sets for Life podcast on Stitcher and Apple. It's a great podcast. I really encourage you guys to check it out. But then, can you talk about then? Because you said you made a mistake while you were in college. You went to a school without your major. So, what are some things though now that once they are in there, I know you said big picture, some, you know, some mistake you saw the mistake that your athletes are making, but like now some tangible tips. What should somebody be doing? What are some action steps they can be taking to really excel? Because again, we're not saying don't work on your game. We're not saying don't try to be your best student athlete. We're not even saying don't try to strive for going pro, but you definitely want to, set yourself up for life after basketball. So, or sports, college sports. So, what are some tips? If you had like a checklist almost, of some things that our college athletes should be doing while in school before it's too late.
The first thing on my checklist is something I didn't do until I was forced to do, and that's to get new friends. Because as athletes, we have our own orientation, We all live there might be athletic dorms on campus. We eat lunch with our teammates. And even if you play football, you might hang out with baseball players or basketball players. We only talk to athletes. And when we're at lunch, all we talk about is what was on Sports Center or our next game or how many threes we hit last night. And we never expand our circle. So the first thing you need to do is really, really start hanging out with some of your classmates or people on campus who don't play sports, because
Mm,
I did the same thing you did. In the summer, I would get retail jobs that were flexible so that I could, complete my summer workouts and get in the weight room and do those things. So once I was hanging out with some new people, I met fellow accounting majors who had, interned with big four accounting firms. And I feel like student athletes are always preparing for the next season, which is great. But I feel like students who don't play sports are really, really focused and they're really trying to prepare themselves for life after graduation. They're filling up that resume with clubs and internships. So, the first thing and the most important thing, in my opinion, is to try to get in new circles. And if I would have one more thing on the checklist, I would really, really encourage you to not see what else you're passionate about or what else interests you, because those questions are going to lead you right back to your sport. What you
mm.
need to try to evaluate is, where can I add value? If I didn't have weights and practice and film and team meetings and all of these things, what would I fill my schedule with? Where can I add value? Do I want to maybe create a documentary, or do I want to, whatever the case may be, start to explore things outside of your sport. But while you're doing that, you need to stay encouraged, because you're so used to being a beast on the court or on the field that when you try this new thing, you're not going to be that good at it. So you need to start practicing, figuring out what you're going to do, and also find a coach in that area. It might be a professor or an administrator or someone else on campus. I don't care if you are LeBron James. LeBron James still has a coach to help him work out and get better. So whatever it is that you start exploring outside of your sport, get somebody who can stay in your ear and help to lead you along this new path.
No, that's phenomenal advice, and this goes. Now we can definitely tie this into the recruitment process. So, a lot of athletes, that they fall in love with the Division One, you know, cachet, if you will.
Mhm.
I want to play D1, D1, D1. That's all they want to do. And you know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah.
they're obsessed over it. And the thing about playing, especially when we talk about the Power Five and like, elite Division One,
Mhm.
you got to take the ego out of it, I feel like, because you got to say, okay, yeah, I can play at this level, but I also want to accomplish other things. And some of those things, like you can't do some of the things that you're talking about, the internships and really trying to set yourself in that regard, or even maybe the workload may not be what may be a bit of a challenge given your Division One schedule and
Right.
demands. So you may be better served going lower tier Division One, or even highly competitive D2, if there are certain things you want to accomplish, or at least bare minimum. I'm not saying don't go Division One, but just recognize that you gotta position yourself. And I just love that advice that you gave is, we definitely tend to hang out with other athletes. And,
Mhm.
can you just talk about like the power that there is in networking? Because, you never know who you're sitting next to in your class. That person, their parents could be the CEO of some,
Yes.
big company. So can you just maybe, are there some networking tips that you can, obviously, study groups and that type of stuff, but how does somebody, again, we're talking 19, 18-year-old, 20-year-old kids, how do we get them to get out of their comfort zone and try to put themselves, in those uncomfortable situations?
I think you said it. Networking is everything. Nothing in life happens without relationships. And I think that as, 18, 19, 20 year olds, it's hard to really understand the magnitude or how powerful relationships are. But I would encourage student athletes to talk to everybody. I mean, every classmate, because you never know. One of them might be a future business partner, or like you said, who their parents are or who they can connect you with. I would literally start a conversation with whoever's sitting next to you or someone standing in front of you in the cafeteria. You never know who you can build those relationships with.
Absolutely. Now you've been dropping some great advice. Really uh, want to give you an opportunity because I was on your website earlier today in preparation, and I saw that you have a book coming out pretty soon. So can you just talk about what prompted you to? Well, first of all, the name of the book. What prompted you to write it, and then what can we expect inside of it?
Oh, absolutely. The book is called The Sweet Spot: Finding Purpose in Life After Sports. And this is, you talk about a passion project. This is something that I am super excited about. It's going to be coming out this November. In the book, you can you can anticipate a lot of nuggets. The book is broken down into three sections, and the first section is Houston, we have a problem. And
Mm,
that's where I talk about some of the unpopular things that go on in college athletics that we try to sweep under the rug and we don't address. And I really talk about the difference between student athletes and students who don't play sports and some of the things that we forget about. I think that sometimes as coaches, as much as I loved having the red carpet rolled out for me as a player, some of those things handicap athletes. Athletes have this go getter mentality and they can do anything. But at the same time, we hold their hand. We do 70% of things for them and then we hold their hand for the other 30%. And sometimes when we graduate, some other students might have a 4-year jump on being prepared for the real world. Because if I had an issue with my housing, I would just text my coach and it was handled. Where if someone else has an issue, they have to go stand in this line. I never stood in lines in college.
mm,
I didn't do that. And I think that sometimes that can hinder us. It wasn't my experience, but some athletic directors say, hey, if the team gets back after midnight, you don't have to go to class the next day, which is sweet when you're
mm,
playing, right? But if I
mhm.
go to Atlanta for the weekend to see one of my friends, I can't call my boss and say, hey, I got an after midnight, I can't make it to work the next day. So I talk about some of these things that we experience as athletes and just sort of shed light on those. The second section is called Sweet Spot Stories, and that's where I literally tell everything, the good, the bad, and the very ugly of my experience. And I also have 8 of my friends who share their experience, and I have former players who are NASA engineers, doctors, actors, any field you can think of, they're in that book. And the final section is called Cheat Codes. And that's where I really, really break down your transferable skill set, how to really set goals, how to be relentless, how to do something that we forget about. And that's finding a new outlet because we're so used to being competitive and being active. And if you were like I was sitting in a cubicle for 40 hours a week, you might go crazy. So I talk about, finding that mental outlet and finding another physical outlet that you can utilize as you move forward. So those are just some of the things that you'll get from the sweet spot.
Awesome, and I love the title of the book. I like the content that's inside of it, based off of what you described. So, where can we, find you, pre-order the book? But then, where can we find you on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook? Really, like, because again, I think you're dropping some great game, pun intended, but you're giving us some great, just some great insight, for our student athletes. And again, yeah, we want to get you there, but at the same time, our mission is really to just equip all of our student athletes in the game of life, before college, during college, and after. So I definitely want them to be able to connect with you if they want to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You can pre-order the book on my website. That's going to be www.joiwalker.com. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Sets for Life 314.
There we go. Sets for life 314. Pre-order the book, The Sweet Spot, and just kind of want to give you the opportunity before I get you out of here and a couple more questions. But you talked about it, so that was really important. About there in some institutions, I mean, not always, but you are right. As a student athlete, they definitely tend to baby you at times. Everything kind of gets done for you,
Mm-hmm.
particularly the higher you go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important, for our athletes, and our parents, where you guys can get involved. even before your student athlete goes away to colleges, is just really at a young age, get them doing things on their own, and, yeah, you got to help them out a little bit, but don't enable laziness. Don't
Right,
solve
right.
all their problems for them, because, you heard Coach Joy just say it. If they play at that high level, they will be pampered for a little bit. But then at the end of the day, when they got to start doing things on their own as adults. If they got it at home with you and then they got it in college, there
Uh-oh.
could be there can definitely be some problems there. But you talked about it. So now one more question before we let you out of here. Talk about that student athlete, right? So again, maybe you're someone who you're going into your senior year of college, you're in your senior year, you're starting to, you realize, what, I'm not going pro, and you're interviewing for those 9-to-5 jobs. Can you just talk about how can they sell themselves, as a student athlete to an employer? Because that is something, when done effectively, you can definitely use that to your advantage. So how can somebody position themselves as a former college athlete to a potential employer?
Wow, that is a great question. And even if you were like me and you did an intern and you are, interviewing for corporate or some of these other jobs, you can still hit the ball out of the park. And to be honest with you, for the first couple of years when I was interviewing, every time I got a situational question, I talked about basketball.
Mhm.
So if someone were to ask me, how, what kind of leadership style do you have? I would refer to stories I had as team captain, or
Mm.
anytime that a question would come up, because you get the same questions over and over again. So anytime someone would ask me, hey, how do you handle adversity? I talk about my junior year. We went into the conference tournament as the ninth seed, knocked off the number one seed, and made it all the way to the championship game. And by the time I got done answering that question, they were ready to slide the job offer across the table.
Mm.
So you really should reflect on your experiences as a player. Look at some of the common interview questions. And if you don't have a lot of job experience, just go off of what you did as a player, what you experienced in high school, in college. There were times when your back was against the wall. There were times when you had to communicate. There were times when you had to lead. Everything that you need to get that corporate job, you have the tools. It's just a matter of convincing this employer or this person across the table that you are the right person for that job.
I love that answer. And now just free tip for our student athletes who are, going on to that next level. Again, I'm a big believer in just taking the negative out of the equation, whatever objection that you think that they may have. So let's say, again, you were me or you were Coach Joy here, and you didn't, from a standpoint of position yourself, with internships, and you didn't have a lot of jobs while in college. You can easily turn that into an advantage. You can easily just simply say, listen, you look at my resume, you're going to see I have a bunch of odd end jobs here and there that don't particularly relate to what I'm applying for today. And that's because, as a college athlete, my time was limited. I didn't have, the ability like every other student to get these other internships, because my team required me to do off season lifting, working out, and all that stuff. However, and then to Coach's point, figure out some stories that you can tell. So instead, what I did in my summer was I was working at this job, 6 hours a day. But before I went to work, I worked out. I got my working with the, on my own. But then I went, right after my job, I went and met with my coach, and I did some film studies. So now what you're doing is you are talking about time management. You talked about, well, I was committed to my team. I was committed to getting better. So you can easily flip that negative into a positive, no problem. So the big takeaway there, and I love it, is figure out a way. Don't just say I was an athlete. I love this advice. Look at some common questions that get asked, and then figure out, okay, what are some stories that I can tell to really, answer that question. Stories are big. Being able to tell your story. I love that answer, Coach. So we always end every episode. I usually give our families a winning play. I give them, something to help them with college recruitment. whatever the case may be. But obviously, we can take a different approach with you. So you can do it from a college recruitment standpoint. You can do it for while you're in school. You can do it for if you're about to graduate. Can you just give our families, or particularly our student athletes, that one winning play that they can do today to set themselves up for success?
It's a lot of pressure.
Well, you've already done a great job, so I think you're up for it.
If I had to give you a winning play, I would want you to realize, if you're graduating, if you're on your way out, realize that the game isn't over. It has just begun. And you don't want to forget about or neglect what has made you successful so far. Once you get into corporate or education or whatever field you're going into, you're still competing. The only difference is now you might have on a suit instead of a jersey. So if you were able to get up at 5 a.m. to go run in the stadium or to go lift, you need to do that. And if you want an advantage, if you want to get promoted, if you want to get a raise on your job, you need to take that same approach and get up early. And maybe you need to listen to a podcast, or maybe you need to read a book. Don't abandon what gave you an advantage as an athlete, and use that as you continue to navigate life after sports.
I love that answer, Coach Joy. And again, my families, as always, I just want to leave you with this: that college recruitment starts with you. What steps are you taking today to earn an athletic scholarship tomorrow? One thing you can definitely do is head on over to joywalker.com. That's JOI, joywalker.com, and pre-order her book, The Sweet Spot. And then after listening to this, check out her podcast, Sets for Life, available on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Coach, I appreciate you. I wish you all the best of luck with your book, and we'll definitely stay in touch.
Thank you so much. Love what you do.